Today's the Transfiguration Sunday, or as Brandon called it when I was talking about preaching this week, Jesus' glow up. But before we get to that, we're starting with the text that Toph read, which is kind of the background text, the story behind the story of the Transfiguration. Moses going up Mount Sinai, you remember, the cloud of divine presence descending and lingering there, Moses going into the cloud and then getting the law, basically. We go several chapters after this reading that we just heard of God's very specific instructions for building the altar and the curtains and the this and the that and all the things that the people should do. Most importantly, we come out with the 10 Commandments, of course. This is in the context of the people of Israel's deliverance from Egypt. They had been enslaved and they have just made their escape and crossed out. And this is their fresh start. This is their moment to find a new way to be community, to be in a relationship to each other and to God. And they are not interested in tweaking Pharaoh's systems. They're not interested in reforms. They are writing a whole new system. And this is what we see Moses doing in these 40 days on the mountain. This is a system that is not of this world. It is God's system as the story goes. And of course, they're holding on to their history, the patriarchs, right? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and on and on. But they're moving forward in this moment in a decisively new way. They're doing something different. And they know that, and it's intentional. Because even though they are out of Egypt, they are liberated, they know that the work of liberation doesn't stop there. The work of liberation continues, and it's never quite complete. We're always playing whack-a-mole with greed and sin and pride and the things that would like to get into the way. But 40 days on the mountain, the divine cloud, fire erupts. It is a really, dramatic scene if you keep reading. And when Moses first comes down, he finds the people have built an altar, a golden calf, you remember, and he throws the tablets with the 10 Commandments and breaks them. Then he has to go back up the mountain and do it all over again. So we're in good company when we see that we're playing whack-a-mole with those issues. He goes back up, he tries again, he comes down, this time his face is shining. Moses has a glow up too. And the 10 Commandments survive, and the point of the whole story is not that Moses' face got shiny and changed, but that this marked a change in the relationship of the people with each other and the people with God. That's the point of the Moses story. And that's the story that's in the background. That's what should be in our head. This is what was in the people's heads when Jesus goes up on the Mount of Transfiguration. We heard Nate read it so beautifully earlier in the service. Jesus and a few of his closest disciples go up the mountain, and again, the cloud of the divine descends. We see Jesus walk away from this encounter also glowing with a shiny face and shiny clothes, just like Moses. So we're clearly invoking this story. And the context is not so different either. The people in Jesus' day are also in a context of liberation from oppression, not oppression by Egypt, a foreign country, but oppression by their own leaders, their own occupiers at the time. This is designating a fresh start for them, a new way to be community. And it isn't a reform of the temple system or a reform of the Roman Empire. It's a whole new way that Jesus comes down that mountain with. And a way that is not based on the systems of the world, but based on the divine voice that we hear again in this moment. Again, here, the disciples and Jesus are holding on to the history and their ancestors, but they are breaking free from the systems of oppression, even when those things are connected, right? If you think back about Moses breaking free from Egypt, who got them into Egypt in the first place? Do you remember? Joseph in his princess dress got sold into slavery into Egypt. Egypt saves them, actually, all of his brothers from famine. So it starts out as a part of God's plan and then becomes this place of oppression and captivity. And this can happen in our own world, in our own religions as well. This is what Jesus is pointing to in his own mountaintop experience. This is what God is pointing to, that it's not breaking from God, but it is breaking from all the ways that our traditions and our histories turn on us to enslave us. The relationship of the law and of Jesus' words and our commitment as the church has always been about people, God's relationship to people, not upholding any particular system. And we see those systems needing to come down and start fresh many times in our scripture. So like with Moses, God breaks into this scene, calls Jesus up the mountain, appears in the cloud, changes Jesus' appearance, and we've got this holy callback to this famous story in the Old Testament. But here, too, the point isn't that Jesus changed. It isn't actually Jesus' glow-up that's the point. The point is that this marks a change in the people's relationship to each other and to the divine. It's us that come down the mountain changed, right? Jesus may be revealed for what he already is, but it's the disciples who have the task of conversion again and again. The Transfiguration is the medium for the miracle, the medium to make the point. It's not the actual point. It points us to the point. You with me? So with Moses, God gave lots of words, right? God told Moses how big to make everything out of what fabrics and what kinds of woods. I was skimming through some of that this week. It made me think, Paul Taylor would really love this. He could make an acacia olive wood bench that has, this many holes in the side and this kind of drapery over it. But we won't make him do that for sure. Now he's got time, though. But it's that kind of level of instruction, chapters and chapters. And then, of course, as I said, that main point, those 10 commandments that kind of draw everything together. But when Jesus goes to the mountain and the divine cloud comes and God speaks again, he doesn't say much. God doesn't say very much at all, just one thing, right? This is my beloved child with whom I am well pleased. The same thing God said at Jesus' baptism. We heard those words. That should sound familiar. But then God gives one command, only one command. Anybody remember what it was? Listen to him. Yes, listen to him. Now, this is probably not what the disciples wanted to hear. They might have rather had instructions on building materials. Because God doesn't say, stay here. That's what Peter wants to hear, right? Let's build some places for us to stay. Let's relish in this moment. But God says, listen to him. And God doesn't say, you are correct. You're following the right guy. You got it right. You're on the right side of history. Good job, right? God says, listen to him. God doesn't say, you win. You're in this moment of glory. You're done. You're safe. God says, listen to him. So what has Jesus been saying? Right before this passage, Jesus is talking about his imminent death and resurrection. And we saw Peter, one of the disciples who's up there on the mountain, the one that wants to stay there, we saw Peter rebuke Jesus and say, no, that can't be what's happening. We're not doing that, Jesus. And Jesus, you remember, calls him Satan. He says, get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block for me. He says, if you want to be my disciple, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And it takes this the divine kind of spelling it out in a way that Peter can see for him to listen, right? Listen to me. After coming down the mountain, if you keep reading, it's the same theme. Jesus is talking about the suffering that is coming and the vindication that is coming in resurrection. Listen to him. And the Greek is really more like keep listening to him. It's the present imperative. Some of my Greek nerds in the audience, I see you, Carly, can tell you, can verify, can check my work. Keep listening to him. Keep listening. This is something that continues. It's not a one and done thing. The community agreement that comes out of this cloud is not tweaking oppressors' language to make it a little more palatable. It's not a new religious location. It's not a new religious system or temple. It's not rules even etched into stone tablets. The new community agreement that comes out of this cloud of the divine is a living embodiment of God's love and justice. The community agreement is Jesus, y'all. It's Jesus. It's not believing the right things about him. It's not checking off your theological test correctly. It's about following him back down the mountain, listening to him, doing what Jesus says. Now, of course, just like Pharaoh turned the original agreement with Joseph and his brothers that was about salvation, just like that was turned into the people's captivity after decades and generations. Just like the priests and scribes and kings in Jesus' day turned the agreement about God's people and how God would relate to them through the temple, just like they turned that into oppressive practices and prescriptions and loopholes for the rich while the poor were pushed down even further. Just like the disciples that were on the mountain that hear the voice of the divine, that see Jesus glowing and hear the call to listen to him, just like they go down directly from there to the garden and fall asleep when he tells them to stay awake. Just like those same disciples get to the cross and run away when there's real risk happening. We also, our world also, the powers of our world also can take Jesus' words and the stories about Jesus and distort them and use them and fail at listening to them. We can take people into captivity. We see this happening now in our world based on some twisted version of Christianity. We see Christian nationalism twisting God's words and Jesus' story into oppression and racism and hatred all the time. We know this happens. It's a pattern, right? We can also fall asleep, forget what we're here for, or just be looking to stay in that glorious moment, or just be looking for confirmation that we're right? Or just be looking for an end that we can say we're done at. But Transfiguration Sunday is our reminder to hear the divine words. Listen to Jesus. Listen, keep listening to Jesus, who tells us the truth about the powers of the world, who invites us to follow him in standing against the powers of the world every time. Right? To not just stand in awe in a worship service of Jesus on the mountain, but to follow Jesus down to the cross, to be transformed ourselves again and again and again. Keep listening. That's the call. Keep being transformed. Listen to him. That's the call. I know that there are competing voices all around our world. When you are feeling lost in that sea, listen to him. Go back to the words of Jesus. Listen to the call of God in your hearts. Beloveds, what is Jesus telling you? What is Jesus asking of you? What is being revealed in our world? What is being changed in our world? How is God calling us into a new moment of being community, of doing love and justice here where we are now. May we continue to listen. May we continue to be changed. Amen.